Good afternoon, Sir Henry and all of my friends in my class. Today I'm going to present about but semantic 2 scope. My name is Paulus Bayu and the material that I will explain in uh, this afternoon is semantic 2 about scope. The first is introduction. This chapter will focus on the latter contextual determination of semantic value. In a sense, the reference of himself in every king admires himself is being determined not by its part, but by other elements in its structural context. In this kind of case, we say that the subject has the object and its scope. This does not negate the basic idea behind compositionality, which was that speakers of the language need to know the meaning of the part of sentence and recognize how those parts are assembled in order to understand the infinitely many different expressions in their language. Sorry. Okay, sorry. The compositionally determined meaning of an expression must allow for the fact that some part of an expression may have values which are set by the context. To understand what is expressed by a sentence on my particular occasion, a speaker must understand this influence too. Appropriately relating constituents like himself to their structural context. This chapter will explore some of ways in which the meaning of a constituent can vary systemically with structural context. And next is pronouns and binding. It should not be surprising that pronouns vary in their interpretation according to the context in which they occur. A careful examination reveals that this influence is systematic and sensitive to structure in surprising ways. We got a first glimpse of this chapter 4, where it was observed that a reflexive pronoun must have an agreeing, commanding antecedent in the same clause. To quickly review each of these points, consider the following sentence. Number 1. Cleopatra amuses herself. Number 2. Antony amuses herself. Number 3. Cleopatra knows that Antony amuses herself. Number 4. Antony and Cleopatra amuses herself. In sentence agrees with the antecedent in number and gender, feminine singular, and it is commanded by the antecedent in 2. The reflexive pronoun has no antecedent. The only possibility is Antony, but that name is traditionally masculine and so it does not agree with the pronoun. The problem with 3 is that the antecedent is not in the same clause as the pronoun. And finally, in number 4 is unacceptable because Cleopatra does not command herself. The only commanding phrase is the whole subject Antony and Cleopatra, but does not agree with the reflexive pronoun. We can say that in 4, reflexive is not in the scope of possible antecedent, meaning that herself is not in a position where its mean can be determined by Cleopatra. These are syntactic pacts, since they condition where reflexive pronoun can appear in syntactic structure, but they are also semantic, since the antecedent determine what the reflective pronoun refers to. In this case, we obviously cannot determine the reference of the pronoun by looking at its parts, but must look at the wider context. And furthermore, only certain parts of the wider context are relevant, namely the C commanding, agreeing phrase in the same clause. Only those C commanding phrases have the pronoun in their scope. By this, we just mean that only they can serve as antecedents in determining the reference of the reflective pronoun. Next is relative scope. First is the relative scopes of negation and DPS. Some sentences are ambiguous, at least in their written form. In spoken language, the ambiguity may be resolved by different intonation counters. Consider the two meanings of 35 and 36. 35. Park didn't solve one problem. E. There is no problem that Park solved. Park didn't solve a single problem. B. There is no particular problem that Park didn't solve, but he might have solved some other problems. 36. Park didn't trick many of the lovers. A. There aren't many lovers that Park tricked. Park tricked few lovers. B. There are many lovers whom Park didn't trick. In 35A, the negotiation has problem in its scope, and in 36A, the negotiation has many of the lovers in its scopes. In effect, the sentence talk about not a single program, but not many lovers. On reading 35B, on the other hand, the problem is outside the scope of negotiation, and in 36B, many of the lovers is outside the scope of the negotiation. The scope relations which are expressed in the paraphrase 35A until B are both possible for 36, and the scope relation expressed in 36A until B are both possible in 36. Semantic 2 scope. Some similar sentence admit not only one interpretation, no matter what the intonation. A DV whose determiner is fewer than 5 takes narrower scopes than negotiation when the DV is a direct object, and broader scopes than negation when it's a subject. And the next is the relative scopes of 2DPS and the ambiguities. 2DPS may also interact in scope. Sometimes the possible interactions give rise to an ambiguity. In 36, in 38, in 39, in 39, two pairs have thought with every attention. A. A. There are two fairies such that each has told every Athenian. B. For every Athenian, there are two possibly different fairies who have talked with him or her. The situation described by 39a involved just two fairies, but the ones described by 39b might involve up to twice as many fairies as there are Athenian. Only up to, because some fairies may help talk with the same Athenians. In 39a, two fairies is said to take broader scope than every Athenian. In 39b, every Athenian is said to take broader scope than two fairies. The next one is scope interpretation. Cannot linguistic knowledge be the source? Let us return to our main line of talk and ask what accounts for the various scope possibilities. Perhaps grammar leaves scope relations figure, and it's the speakers and hearers or listeners knowledge about a given situation that determines scope interpretation. Recall in 36 above. Fact didn't solve one problem. A. There is no problem that Park solved. Park didn't solve a single problem. B. There is one particular problem that Fact didn't solve. If we know that Fact completely mixed up Aberson, orders, and someone says in 35, we readily interpret it is as A. In example, Park didn't solve a single problem with with not having broader scope than one problem. On the other hand, if we know that Park did a good but not perfect job, we readily interpret it is as B, with one problem having broader scope than none. Next one is the marking of scope relations, morphology and syntax. Cross-linguistic data can be used to corroborate the claims about scope that have been made on the basis of English. Various languages fix the scopes of operators in their morphology or syntax. We illustrate this with example from Greenlandic Eskimo and Hungarian. I'm sorry for the trouble because I'm not good today. First is Greenlandic Eskimo. Greenlandic Eskimo is a polysynthetic language. As discussed in chapter 2, this term means that various ingredients of the meaning of the sentence are expressed by bound morpheme affixes attached to the verb. They may or may not be independent constituents in the sentence related to each suffix. Bittner, 1995, suggests that in most cases, comments in the morphological structure of the word containing that suffix. An important background assumption is that Eskimo words have the following structure. Following structure, you can see it in the picture in the my slide. That is a suffix sequence, the suffix that present in precede it in linear order. The following example illustrates the correlation of sequence and scope. In 52, the relative scope of the Taryaka mass and Lear behind operator is involved. When Lear follows Taryaka, they means begins to have two. When Taryaka follows Lear, they mean have to begin to. It's the same mean. The relevant morphemes and their translation are highlighted. Example: Atwar Tarika Lir book study must begin. Indicate transitive. He began to have to study. B. Atwa Lir Taryakar book study began must. Indicated transitive. He had to begin to study. Stem, suffix 1 and suffix 2. In 53, the relative scope of energy or not and an indefinite a book is involved. This relation is encoded by the relation of negative suffix and the suffix. That S I that marks the presence of the price of a book on the verb. When energy follows SE, the interpretation is not a single book. When SE follows G, the interpretation is one book note. In the glosses, negation is abridged as an EG and the morpheme SE is indicated as SE. Focus on the highlight morphemes. One reason why the Eskimo data are important is because Eskimo morphology disambiguates scope. Eskimo speakers have to be systematically clear about the intent scope interpretation of their sentence. Initially, the same way as English speakers need to be systematically clear about the tense, present, past, etc. of their sentence, as clearly indicates that universal grammar is equipped with equipped with the means to encode scope distinction. And scope interpretation is not merely a matter of situational or conceptual knowledge. Next is Jungerian. Jungerian does not employ verbal affix to disambiguate scope. It uses constituent order instead. That is, the surface see common relation of DPS and other pre-standing operator determine the scope relation ambiguously. I have two example. First example, shock ember mindective pelhipot. Many man nom everyone assist up called. Or many pen upon everyone. Or there are many men who each upon everyone. The second example is mine connect shock ember fell hip hop. Everyone SSA many men nom up called. Many men upon everyone. Or in the same sentence, for everyone, there are many men who pon him. Potentially different set of colors for each case. The Jungerian data can be used to make the same point as the Eskimo data. The determination of scope is a matter of grammar. but Hungarian supports a pinner point. Also, we observe that the left to right order of Hungarian DPS determine their relative scope, but Hungarian DPS are not simply lined up in the desired scopal order. Okay, the next is the summary. In, in summary, we have seen that certain expressions always depend on others for some aspect of their interpretation. Relative pronouns and negative polarity items are some of the examples. A reflective pronoun needs an antecedent, and a negative polarity items need a licensor. Certain other expressions may depend on other for some aspect on their interpretation. Personal pronoun and indefined noun phrase are some of the examples. A quantifier may bind a pronoun, and it may induce referential variation in a indefinite. In all these cases, we said that dominant member of the relation has the dependent members in its scope, and observe that scope is constrained by the syntactic sequence configuration. Of the four relations mentioned above, the scope interaction between two noun phrase is the most influenced by the linguistic and non-linguistic context. To show that this matters belongs within grammar proper, we propose some methods to corroborate intuitions about particular readings, and observe that there are languages which disambiguate quantifiers scope in their open morphology or syntax. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you, and maybe you have question, please write in the group. Thank you. See you.